Hello, everyone. I'm Renee. I'm your host today for the Giant Slayers podcast. And today I have with me Shannon and Troy Davis, who are from Georgia, and they've got themselves a heck of a testimony. And I'm excited to get going and to share that with you. So, guys, can you tell me a little bit about your testimony and how you got to know God and what that looked like for you guys?
Yes, our story is a story of hope, and we love to share it just so other people can know that no matter where you are, no matter where you've been, that there's hope in Jesus, and God can do anything, basically. So we're just going to share a little bit about just our childhood, and then go from there with everything that we have walked through with the Lord. I grew up in a home, a broken home, at about the age of 9. My parents divorced when I was 9, and that just they both loved me. There was never an issue of lack of love, but there was the issue of lack of a father physically being in the home. My dad would get us every other weekend or any other time that he could, but there was still that lack of a father, and I didn't know it back then, but it did affect me as a child. And so I found myself searching out in the world for my identity. I didn't know to look to Jesus for my identity back then. And so I sought it out in relationships and things like that, starting pretty early, very early teenage years. I started just seeking out relationships with boys and looking for that thing to fill that void that I had, and not knowing at the time that the only thing that could fill that was Jesus. So I was just in different relationships, and I started drinking, smoking marijuana, things like that, just to try to fit in. Once again, just trying to find my identity out there in the world. And that just continued on throughout my high school years. My mom remarried, and we moved from a really large town to a really small town. And one of those situations where if you're not born there, it's a little bit hard to fit in. So I of course fit in with the wrong crowd and the partying and all of that, and still trying to fill that void that whole time throughout my teenage years.
Yeah. I'll open up with a couple scriptures before we get started. And as you listen to our testimony, you'll find this to be true. The first scripture I want to open up with is Luke 1:37. It says, "For nothing will be impossible with God." We're walking with God now, but I hadn't always walked with God, as you will hear. I was pretty wretched. I lived for the devil for a long time. I was in bondage to drugs and alcohol for 27 years. I've done it all. I've been there and I've done that. And when you live that lifestyle, all different kinds of things come with that lifestyle. So needless to say, I was a pretty rotten guy. Proverbs 13:20 tells us, "Walk with wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble." And that's what she was talking about. We can choose who to be around. We can choose the people of influence. You can show me 5 of your friends and I can tell you about anything I need to know about you. We're pretty much a product of our environment. And I think for me, my childhood, that was my weakness, because I was kind of a social butterfly. I was just an old country boy that got along with all the different classes. I got along with the good, the bad, the ugly. I didn't have I never judged. I hung out with the folks that had money, but I'd hang out with the folks that didn't have money. And when you're social like that, there's really no boundaries. And that's really what got me started, so to speak, in my addiction, I think, because I kind of done whatever people did where I was at, and not realizing that I had such an addictive personality. And another thing I want to mention before I get started is I like to use the old jigsaw puzzle. You ever put together a 5,000 piece puzzle and then one be missing? That stinks. Because that puzzle is just not complete without that one little piece that you may be missing. See, God made us like a jigsaw puzzle. He put us together, he formed us together, but he left out one spot, one piece, so to speak. And that's the free will when it boils down to it. But you're going to put something in that empty spot, whether it's drugs, alcohol, might be gambling, porn. It could be a number of things. The only thing that'll fit and work is Jesus. And I'm living proof of that because I put everything in it but Jesus for a long time. I knew I was called to ministry at a young age. My papa was a Baptist preacher. He passed when I was 5. Y'all hear more about that in a little bit. But yeah, I run from God for a long time. Like I said, and I think my biggest weakness was just not being able to have the eyes to know that I wasn't supposed to be there. And we can see that on today's news. The kids hadn't been trained up in a way that they haven't been trained up in this right here. And it's obvious because the world's crazy right now. The world, I don't know. We just need more Jesus. But anyway,
we're definitely looking for a lot of answers right now. I think it's actually a really good time, even though it's very painful for a lot of people. I think it's good because we're starting to ask questions, and because we're starting to see that what we thought was good enough is just so empty and so unhealthy, really, right? So it's quite an interesting time for sure.
Right. Progressively through high school, like Shannon, I started smoking weed and of course the alcohol. I think I was good. Yeah, I was doing illegal stuff, but I was introduced to pain pills, and that's really where my journey started. The pain pills took me to a place that I never dreamt I'd go. They cost me my first marriage. They cost me a house, vehicles, boats, everything that ever meant anything to me. The pain pills took from me. And even after losing it all, it wasn't enough to make me quit. That's how strong the addiction is. And I'm sure that unless you're living under a rock, you know somebody that's in addiction. Chances are somebody in your family that's in addiction. But I am here to tell you today there's always hope because, I thank God because I had some praying grandmas, I had some praying parents, and I believe that's why I'm here today because without them prayers, I don't think I'd have been protected like I was because I've been to some bad places, y'all. I've done some not so good things, and it's only through the grace of God that I'm alive. But yeah, you go ahead. I'll stop there and let Shannon talk a little bit.
So after I got through, up into my early 20s, I had calmed down a little bit with the party life, and thank God I never got addicted to anything during that time. My thing was the relationships, the broken relationships, and I ended up getting married in my early 20s and to the father of my 2 sons. And not waiting on God to bring me a husband as we should do. so many times we just go out there and find our own, and that's a mistake. But that's what I did, and that was a very toxic relationship, and we brought 2 children into the world, and then we ended up getting a divorce, and I moved. I was broken, so I went right into another relationship with someone else that I had met, which as women, we do that often. If we're broken, we don't seek out the Lord to get healed. Instead, we just look for that next person that makes us feel better or feel better about ourselves. So that's what I did, into the next relationship. And he was in the Air Force, so we ended up getting married. He got transferred to New Mexico, so we moved 1,500 miles away from everything that I knew, and took the boys with us. And they were, I think, 3 and 5 at the time, and they had issues themselves just from all of the turmoil that went on in my first marriage. And so we went out there, and he didn't have any children. And so that was also another toxic relationship, unfortunately. And we were married for 6 years. And so we ended up getting a divorce. So there I was with 2 kids, 2 divorces. And, during all this time, I considered myself a Christian because I had been taken to church when I was little as a child, and I considered myself a Christian, but I definitely wasn't living that lifestyle. And I didn't have that intimate relationship with the Lord like I do now. If I had, I would have made a lot of different choices, but I didn't. But we got a divorce, and he left and got transferred somewhere else. And I stayed because I had built a life out there and with my kids. And so I stayed. And there was one summer that we came home, and Troy and I got to share about this, but we actually grew up together. We graduated high school together, just really good friends. Oh, never dated, but we were really close friends. And so I came home. I would come home during the summer a lot of times and bring the boys. And there was this one summer that I just wanted to see Troy. I had seen him in 20 years, and I knew that he was in bad shape from what I had heard. But I just had this longing to find him, to see him. So I rode by his old house, never could catch him at home. So I went back to New Mexico, and not too long after that, I talked to a mutual friend that we had in high school, and just told her that I wanted to see Troy. And she told me that he was helping her husband put the flooring down in their house so that I could see him whenever I came home. So that I used to tell people that Georgia was calling me. I would just get this feeling that I had to come home. And when I got that feeling, I had to come home. And I didn't want to stay here, though. This was where all my pain was at, and so I didn't want to come here. I didn't want to come here to live, but I did want to come visit. And
so at that point, like, did you know that it was God leading you, or was it just a knowing, or what was that?
At that time, I don't think I did, because I still, I had not entered into that intimate relationship with the Lord still right. At that time. I just knew that I had this something drawing me home. And so my dad had come out to New Mexico and was staying with us for Christmas. It was Christmas, and it was Christmas Eve, and I had that feeling. It was just overwhelming, and I knew that I had to go home. And so I told my dad, I said, I've got to go home. And he said, okay. I said, I've got to go to Georgia. And he said, okay, well, when do you want to go? And I said, I've got to go now. And he said, well, okay, we'll pack up in the morning. We'll hit the road, you know, and I'll follow you back because he lived here. He said, I'll follow you back to Georgia. And so that's what we did. We got up Christmas morning and loaded everybody up, and we drove to Georgia. And when I got here, I had checked in with that friend, and she had a lot going on in her life and sick family members, and she didn't really know where Troy was, and so I just kind of forgot about that. And New Year's Day, I was sitting at my mom's dinner table, and the phone rang, and it was my friend, and she said, I've got Troy on the other line, and he wants to see you. And so found out where he was at. He was just a few miles down from my mom's house. So I had all these pictures, you know, of us as kids, teenagers, all this stuff. So I loaded everything up, and I went to where he was at. And, you know, when you hadn't seen somebody in 20 years, that's a long time, you know, especially a high school friend that you grew up with. And so I can remember thinking, and I think I said this out loud when I got out of the car, I said, oh my gosh, you're all grown up. And so anyway, I was scheduled to drive back to New Mexico the next day. We were going back home, and he talked me into staying and let him take me out to eat. And so I stayed, and we went to Red Lobster, and we've been together ever since.
Yeah.
All right on.
Crazy story.
There's nothing like a good Red Lobster to keep you down.
I gotta do it right. But to really appreciate that story, you have to really know Shannon, because she's as anti-drug as they come because of the past. She don't want no part of it. She don't have no tolerance for it. But for her to be looking for me, that's when I knew it was something other than just her feelings, because she don't want to be around it. She don't want to have no part. And she knew what. At that, I was probably at one of my lowest points at that time. As far as the drug use to sell, I was just, it wasn't good, and she knew that, and that's really when my wheels started turning. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew when she invited me to come out west, I knew that was my opportunity, because I really thought that I could get away from the lifestyle moving, but you can't. So if you're watching this, y'all don't fool yourself into thinking that you can move away from a situation and it's not going to be out there. It don't matter what you're doing, especially in addiction. I think some of the first people I met out west was selling pills and stuff, and so I don't know. I just think it's the devil's work. He's gonna put us together with people that feed us, and it wasn't good. But when I went out west, I managed to quit doing the drugs, but my drinking increased. That's what we do as addicts. We always I don't know what you call it, substitute one thing for another. I went from the pills to the meth when I was here. You know, at least I ain't doing pills, I'd be doing meth. Get off the meth, be doing pills. So it was just always a vicious cycle. But I want to say this to the people that has a loved one in addiction. Don't give up on them, because when they tell you they want to quit getting high, most of the time they mean it. When they're crying and begging, just one more time, you know, they mean it. They want to quit, but they don't know how. And I'm a firm believer, because I quit doing drugs many times. I just couldn't stay quit. You're not going to do it without Jesus. Not and hold on to it. I know guys that was in recovery 10, 12, 15 years, but they never got Christ. And relapse is coming without Jesus. You're going to relapse. But for the codependents and the enablers, y'all, it's hard to see the person as who God made them, because all we see is the devil on them. You know, I know a bunch of good people in addiction, bigger hearts as you could ask for, but they're in that bondage and they don't know no way out. So if you have that loved one or know that special person that's in addiction, try to lead them to Christ. Get them to the foot of Jesus, and that's where the work will begin. Like I said, I knew Jesus. I grew up in church. At the age of 5, I'll just go ahead and go to this. We get high for a reason. I used to say I got high just because I like to be high, and that's not true. Probably 99.9% of the time, you're getting high because there's something in your life, there's something in your childhood, something in your past that you're trying to cover up, something you're trying to mask or filling that void. For me, it was my papa that I mentioned earlier. At the age of 5, see, he was a recovered alcoholic as well. I didn't know him when he drank. He come back from the war drunk. He was a body man. He done body repair work on vehicles, and he had a little shop right outside of town. I stayed with him probably more than I did with Mama and them. You know, I can remember what he smelled like. I can remember that old grease in his hair. He was a short dressed man, but he put that old Dapper Dan stuff in his hair, and I can remember his recliner. I can remember sitting in the chair with him and when he studied the Word, and I don't know. It was a love that I hadn't, other than Jesus. You know, I had never experienced that type of love from anybody else. And I sometimes question or wonder how I remember so many things about him. Excuse me. How I can remember the details that I remember, you know, and I think that was a Jesus thing. But back to the story, he had a body shop, and there was one Saturday. I was with him every weekend, but this particular weekend I wasn't. I chose to go stay with a friend, and he had a stiff leg from the war. Well, he ended up falling off a ladder that Saturday, and he had a massive heart attack and died at the shop. And my entire life, I carried that. I carried it in a way that if I'd have been there that Saturday, I could have maybe got to the phone a little quicker, you know, because he was able to crawl to the phone. But I did. I blame myself. The pain was when I would go to church from that point. I used to couldn't even talk about it, so I know God's done healed me of that. But it's because I finally got victory. When I went to rehab, I was just out. I was talking with a guy one night, and he brought something to light that changed my life forever. It wasn't none of the meetings. It wasn't none of the classes that we took. It was just one conversation with this guy. And I was sharing with him about what I just shared with y'all about Papa. And he looked at me and said, "Troy," he said, "you don't get it." I said, "What you talking about?" He said, "God blessed you that day." He said, "That wasn't a place for no 5-year-old to be and watch his granddad die." You know, and I've never, not one time in my life, looked at it like that. And he's right. He's right. The good Lord took me out of that situation because it would have damaged me as such a young boy. And that's when my life changed. Because I was able to get rid of that burden inside of me that was eating away like a cancer. You will find out in recovery that, you know, that's why I think it's step 4 in the step work. You know, to where you're to dig up all these old things, the people that have harmed you, the things that hurt you. We got to speak it. We got to get it out. If not, it'll eat away at you like a cancer. And you're not going to experience true freedom until you speak it. There's something about speaking that takes the power away from it. I used to question God why he wouldn't take this addiction, why he wouldn't just help me through this. God's not going to do nothing for you that you can do for yourself, is what I've come to know. We got to give our 100% being to him. I would give him 95% or 99%, and I'd still be just as lost as I was. Until I give him my life, until I give him 100% of my being, that's when he come in and started working on little Troy. It was tough, but I tell you that story about Papa because it can be something so simple. I mean, it's a big deal, but it could be something so simple that the devil has just covered our eyes and our mind with that, you know, it looks like I'd have seen that before. I was in my 40s. Never, not one time. I cried a many a day, still blaming myself. You know, the pain was so bad, I couldn't even go to church anymore. That's what kept me out of church because, I mean, they used to call me little preacher man. I'd sit up there behind Papa at the, you know, when he was preaching. That was just where we was. I was standing at the door shaking hands when people left. And the pain was just unbearable because all I could see was Papa up there and the blame that I was carrying for his death. And I just thank God for freedom because he give it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that like the childhood hurts can sometimes be some of the worst. Those roots are so deep. I lost my mom at 2.5, and it was like a piece of identity was broken, right? And I think because you're just so little, you don't think that that's going to affect the whole rest of your life. And when you don't have people that can put it into words, you just have this hole that you're just like, why isn't nothing making it better? Why can't I figure this out? What's, you know, you're looking for that puzzle piece, right? You're like, there's something missing and I don't know what to do about it. Right. And, but yeah, until you're willing to actually go down into the dirt to get up those roots up, he can't do anything for you. It's not that he doesn't want to. I mean, God's, you know, I think that whole entire time of watching us suffer is just aching for us because it's like, he knows you don't have to live through this. And sometimes it's generational stuff. So like, there's just so many factors. But yeah, the minute you say yes, it's just, I all the time sit down and just think, wow, Jesus, like you are so good. Like, how did you do that? But it's how you come together and be like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Take it. But it's that surrender. There's that beauty in that surrender with him for sure.
So we lived he came out to New Mexico and we lived out there for a couple years, and we got married, and I had said I would never come back to Georgia, but here we are. So God had a different plan. So we got married, and then that summer we moved back to Georgia, and I was terrified to move back to Georgia because I was afraid of, you know, he was still drinking at that point, and actually, this is how the enemy works. I had joined him in that. As much as I, you know, was against it, I had started drinking as well. And so we moved home, and he got a job. And anyway, he was right back in the addiction pretty quickly, being around the same people that, you know, he had been around before. And God started working on my heart, and so I stopped. I stopped the drinking, and I told him I couldn't do that life anymore. And I started, you know, putting pressure on him to stop. And I found out quickly that I couldn't fix him. And so time rolled on, and we got involved in church. God was just drawing us to church as a family, and we got back into church, got involved in church, and God was just speaking to my heart. I developed that hunger for Him that I had never felt before, and at that point, I was all in, and I had that relationship that I had never had with God before. And so I just continued to move forward. Troy wasn't really there yet. He didn't have that hunger, and he was still living in addiction, but hiding it at that point. I didn't know. I felt like I knew because as a codependent, we drive ourselves crazy, investigating and trying to find out and prove what we really know is true. We know it's true, but they do a good job at hiding it. So we went through that quite a while, and we helped bring a church up, and we knew at that point that that the Lord was calling us to ministry. Troy had actually been asked to lead the men's ministry at that church, and still living this double life, but nobody knew it. And so at that point, I had gone out of town for a business trip, and things were rocky with us because I knew what I knew, but I couldn't prove it. And so it was just living that life for a while. And when I went out of town, things got bad. He didn't go to work. He spent a bunch of money. And so when I came home, he was in the bed. And I knew at that point that I had to do something. So I actually talked to some people. I called his dad, which was a big no-no because he didn't want his dad to know what was going on. And so, but I called his dad because I had made up my mind at that point that I was willing to lose him if he wanted to leave me, but I wasn't willing to lose him to the drugs and the death and the destruction and all of that. So I actually put together a little intervention.
Just like TV.
At our house. I had his dad show up. He was in the bed. He was still in the bed. And I had his dad come, and I had our pastor and his wife and the associate pastor. And I think his mom was there. But they all came that morning. And so when Troy woke up, he woke up to visitors at our house. I had already worked it all out and got him a place in a rehab if he would be willing to go. We had people help us, and they had a bed waiting for him that day.
Yeah, that was when I woke up to see my dad. That's first thing was anger, because my dad was the one that you just didn't do that, and she knew it, and boy, it angered me. But my dad knew me good enough to know what to expect. He was in the bedroom, and I could hear people talking in the living room, and the anger welled up in me, and I was finna get up and run everybody out of my house. I mean, I was done. Power of prayer, y'all. My dad laid on top of me and wouldn't let me out of that bed. He physically laid his body on top of me and started praying.
Wow.
And I felt the presence of God, I think, probably for the first time ever. A calmness come over me, a peace come over me, and just my mind, first thing I thought was, here's your opportunity, you fool. that was the moment I've been looking for. I physically couldn't quit getting high. I just couldn't do it. And God wouldn't take it from me because I used to ask him every day. I was wanting to quit, but I couldn't. And yeah, that's when everything changed. We loaded up. I was still kind of mad. I don't know that we hugged and kissed.
Yeah, if looks could kill, I would not be here anymore. When he walked out that door, I felt like it was over for us, but I knew that I was at that point where I was willing to lose him so he could get help.
Yeah.
You know, and what I found, if there's anybody watching this that's in addiction, you'll find out that when you finally choose to do what's right, people will respect you for it. You know, like she said, my senior pastor was there, his wife, and everybody was there. Everybody that was anybody in our life was there. And that was quite humbling. You know, the pride that we walk in when we're in addiction, the arrogance, the lies. Man, when you can finally just expose it, there's such freedom there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hard to put into words how I felt when my dad laid on top of me because I was mad now. No, and the biggest deal was him being there. That was just we didn't do that. But to see the joy on his face when we riding across Georgia to go to this rehab, because he knew our relationship was pretty much broken. He wasn't no enabler. He knew that something was up with me. He knew when we go visit that something was up with me. Not many days go by now that we don't talk. God's a healer. He's a restorator. Oh man, I don't even know what to say.
Well, he went to rehab. That was just a 6-week program, and most of the time you need longer. I mean but being in minute, just doing the things that we were doing, he had the God part. He just needed the tools and the separation from everything else to get off of the drugs. But so when he came back, well, I spent that whole 6 weeks just focusing on me and the Lord, and I went to meetings multiple times a week for me because I needed healing. I was broken. I was broken to have ended up in the relationship in the first place. Still, I was broken, but so I needed to heal, and I spent that time doing that and praying, a lot of praying. Our church family, they carried me through that 6 weeks. We had a lot of prayer meetings, and God just showed up and he carried us. But whenever Troy came back, there was already a ministry starting for Celebrate Recovery with him. God had already laid it on the pastor's heart. He was to lead it. And so this is a very short period of time. So he was only gone for 6 weeks, but all of this started coming together, and God just pieced it all together for that ministry. And then when he came home, we just stepped right, almost immediately stepped into the Celebrate Recovery ministry and leading that. And that went on, I think it was the next year. He was ordained as a pastor, and
September 27th.
September 27th of the following year, he was ordained as a pastor. And
we've been wide open.
we've been wide open with ministry ever since. And we got the opportunity to just share in so many people's lives during that time that were broken, and we saw a lot of testimonies come through, and one of the things that I just like to share is the common denominator in most everybody's story that we've ever heard was the lack of a father. And there were some that, you know, did not have the mother figure, but the majority was lack of a father. And it could be physically the father out of the home or out of the situation. It could be the father was there, but he was emotionally detached or abusive or in addiction, one of those categories. And that was at the root of almost every testimony we ever heard and everybody that ever walked through those doors. And that was 5 years of that. And it was a lot of people, and they all, almost all, I would say probably 97, at least 97% had that lack of a father. So it's so important for any of you dads listening out there. It's so important. Your role is just so crucial in your children's lives.
Yeah, it's huge, and I believe that. And a friend and I were actually chatting about that recently, where we're in a time right now where we need men to remember who they are and stand up more than ever before in history. And so I totally get what you're saying there. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, all throughout the Bible, it tells us what men are supposed to do. We all called. I mean, we're going to be held accountable for the things that we do and don't do as the leaders of our house. Like she said, she was talking about the fathers, the lack of, you know, there, and you wonder why it's not the mothers. And I'm not saying that that's never not the case, but there's something about a mother's love, whether or not they're in your life or not, you know she loves you. But a father, it's not like that. It's just seeking the approval of your father. Boys and girls alike, it's all the same. And I don't know, I guess that's just the way we're wired. That's the way God made us. But it's very, very keen. And like that's a good point. I've preached that a lot lately on Sundays is, man, we got to step up. If we're going to see any change in this world, it's on us. And it's going to take the power of Jesus. It's going to take Christians in total, because that's what God's waiting on. Yeah. You know, we've sat on our hands too long. We have been, right now we still have the opportunity to speak out. And there's going to come a time that if we keep sitting on our hands, we're not going to be able to speak out anymore as a Christian.
Yeah.
But it's up to the men, man. We're called to be priests of our home and the leaders of our home. If you can't lead your home, you can't lead nowhere. You know. Yeah. It's just, and we're going to have to answer for that. We're going to have to stand before God Almighty and answer for that. And I mean, I want to do what's right, because I don't want to have to explain myself, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think like we were actually talking about too, about how we know more strong women than we know strong men. And it's not really a fun thing to have to recognize, but it's even that there's been so many women now being called to stand up and speak up because our voices have been crushed for years. But there's so much power in having a brother, whether it's in the church or whether it's wherever, that can give you the space as a woman even to have a safe place where you're not going to be looked at like a piece of meat. You're not going to be treated like your voice doesn't matter or whatever. So even those kind of men that can be brothers, where they can give women safe places to rise up, because you know, for so many years we've been man against woman, and you know, women kept down, and now women are rising, so they want to do the same demand. But that's not the answer. It's joining together as a family and running forward. And so we need our guys for sure.
Yeah. And it all boils down to pride.
Yeah.
A bunch of prideful people we are these days.
Yeah, we're kind of dumb.
Yeah. Because I don't think no, I ain't gonna go.
Thank God he doesn't hold that against us, though, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And before we wrap up, there's a couple more things I want to share.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, so often, so many times we think that we're not worthy. We think that our past defines us. Uh, you know, God allows these things in our life for a reason. He don't put them. He don't put the burdens on us, but He does allow them. But I think it's just part of the purifying. It's part of the process that makes us who we are. Uh, there's power in our testimonies. I have seen lives change forever through testimony. I've probably seen more people come to Christ through the word of testimony versus the word, you know, my preaching, because it gives people hope. So what I want people to know is that each one of us has eternal value. Each and every one of us has eternal value because our significance, God don't make no junk. And it don't matter how raunchy we chose to be in the past. God didn't make junk. We're made in the image of Christ. And it don't matter where you've been or what you've done, God can still use you. You see, I have access to places that a regular senior pastor may not have because I've lived it. He hadn't never been on the street. I have access to some dark places. I still have. I can talk it. I know what they're thinking. I know where to go. You know, and he wouldn't dare go. So I always look at it like that. You know, the church body, it takes all of us. It takes every kind. You know, this body right here is not complete without every little joint. You know, some of us are the fingers, some of us are the toes. But it takes all types, and God will use you no matter where you've been or what you've done.
Yeah, all three of us are testimony to that.
Yeah, amen. Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the thoughts I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." Y'all, when we give our lives to Christ, it all changes. We're made in His image. All the junk that you've done has been forgotten. He said He forgets as far as the east is from the west. That's a long way. He's to remember it no more. Will we ever be perfect? No. There's only been one perfect one, and that's Jesus Christ. But we can strive to be a little more like Him every day. And through your obedience and through your willingness to serve Him, He will give you the strength to overcome. It don't matter. He'll give you the strength to do whatever He calls you to do. You know, He don't call to equip. He equips to call. So just know that and know that and find out who you are in God's eyes, not the world's eyes. Because the world wants to see us fail 90% of the time. There's people out there waiting on me to relapse, but there's people out there that's got my back like they knew tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Did you have anything else to add there, Shannon?
I'll just speak to the wives out there. If there are wives out there that their husbands, you know, are in addiction, like the situation that I was in, I just want to encourage you to focus on your walk with the Lord, because He's the one that's got to fix your husband. You can't do it. Unfortunately, we try, but we will fail. We can't fix them. And that goes for our children as well. We can't fix our children, especially our grown children. So we just need to focus on our relationship with the Lord and becoming closer and closer with Him. When I started my true journey, my true relationship with Him, He spoke to me first through the little simple scripture, Psalm 46:10, which says, "Be still and know that I am God." And He will still deal with me with that same scripture today if I start getting busy trying to do His work for Him, you know, because we just have to be still. And He is God, and He will take care of things in His own time, in His own way. We just have to trust Him, and we just have to walk in obedience. And that's what we need to do. We need to work on our relationship with the Lord and let the Lord work on our husbands.
I think there's a lot of power and testimony when you live the life, because sometimes we can spout it off and then people are watching us going, well, I don't really get your life. Like, you're saying one thing but doing another. But I think sometimes when you're quiet and you're just doing that life, even though it's hard, I think that speaks volumes too, for sure.
Yeah. And I need to say one more thing, because it's so crucial. If you're dealing with somebody in recovery, you know, this is a family disease. That's why I'm grateful that when I was in rehab, one of the requirements of that rehab was that she attend meetings too, because she didn't understand. But to go and be with people that's lived it and been there, some of us already got victory through it. It is so important, y'all, because she could have thrown me in a relapse just as quick as anybody, not knowing how to handle me when I got home. People need to understand what that addict's going through. People need to understand the do's and don'ts of when he gets out. And that's very, very crucial, because, you know, so often when we go to rehab, we don't burn our bridges, and we come home and everybody's still jacked up. They done heard the talk. They heard the lies, and that's what they're going to expect again, because they don't put that wall up. But it's crucial for the recovery of your loved one to understand it and to know what works, because it's a big deal.
That's actually a powerful key, and I'm really glad you shared that, because I think a lot of times when people are in these situations and, you know, they've had their bank accounts drained, or they've had things taken out of their houses, or, you know, whatever it is for their loved one to get high again, oftentimes what happens is they're like, just get out of here, and they end up on the streets and stuff where nobody even knows they exist. And I think that's where, you know, a lot of damage can be done too, because then the devil can just keep whispering to them, like, nobody wants you, you're not loved, you're not worth it, you're not, you know, you're just garbage, look at you on the street, right? And so I'm really glad that you shared that, because I think that's very powerful. No? So before I close, I really like to ask people, just so people know like how personable God is, do you guys have a favorite encounter with God, or an encounter that was really powerful? I know, Troy, you mentioned when your dad laid on you and prayed, that was really cool. Do you guys have any other ones that you could share that you would like to share?
So much. One thing that just comes to my mind right now was, you know, when we did this intervention and he went to rehab, we didn't know what was going to happen with his job. I mean, this was all like just, you know, happened very quickly. And I had a business that I was trying to start up and run, and that had not worked very well. And so we depended on his income completely. And to see what God did in that situation, he left, and they ended up paying. What do you call it? They advanced his sick and annual leave for him for that full time. So
Wow.
I never missed a paycheck. When he was gone, it picked up. There was no delay, nothing. It picked right up and came on time. But at the same time, and we had started tithing. Gosh, I don't know, a couple years before that, and even through hard times, you know, once we started, we never stopped. And so during that time when he left, we had a check come in the mail. There was no return address. It was just like a cashier's check, you know, so there wasn't any names on it. It was for $1,000, because I didn't know how, you know, like, how am I going to do all this? Yeah, and so yeah, he's good and he's faithful. And during all of that time, he even laid it on somebody's heart to give us a vehicle because we were down to one vehicle. So just, yeah, we have so many stories of God and his goodness and just the things that he has done for us.
Yeah, I guess for me, as far as that one episode, but I have seen God in the recovery ministry just transform people's minds and just a simple prayer. Uh, God is such a God of order. God is a personal God. God is a God likes for you to be specific, especially in your prayers. You know, our little minds don't think as big as God. And I think, you know, for me in the recovery ministry, it was a lot easier for me to pray for people for some big deals. I'm talking about these big transformations. And to see God do that, man, it's very humbling. And just to witness, you know, because all we got to do is be willing. He'll use you. It's nothing I do, but I'm willing just to be that vessel that he can flow through. And man, you will see things that is just that your mind you can't even wrap around it. You know, he's given us promises in the Bible that we stand on, and that's how we get through life, especially with the kids or family. It gives you, just looking at that Bible is full of promises. And man, he's just such a good father.
Yeah, he really, really is. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for being with me today. I so enjoyed you guys sharing your journey, and I have no doubt that it'll speak to a lot of people. So thank you for that.
Praise God.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime. The pleasure was mine. So if people want to contact you or learn more about you guys, is there somewhere that they can meet you online?
We have a Facebook page. It's called Worship and Wellness, and there was another Worship and Wellness out there. So they would have to go to the link. It's actually it's facebook.com, and the page is if you type it in, it's Troy and Shannon Worship and Wellness, and that will take them.
Okay, awesome. I will link that down below on all my media there for people to connect with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.